So welcome. I'm so excited to invite Steve, who was, of course, not only the composer of Butterfly in the Sky, but served as music director and composer for the entire 20-year run.
26 years, 155 episodes. Oh, thank you. Sorry.
So I want to sort of take a step back and ask you first to tell us a little bit about yourself and how did your journey with music start?
Let me just get one more swallow. I've been a musician my whole life, actually. And my journey of music started with my mother, who used to play the piano for me. And from there, it just evolved into a love of music. And I've been composing since I was 5 years old.
Wow.
Obviously, pretty simple stuff back then.
And you said something really amazing in the documentary, that you wanted to create a sound that would have children come running.
Yep.
What is it about music that you feel like has that quality?
Well, in this particular instance, it was actually my co-writer, Janet Weir, who's my wife now. We've been married for a long time. She had two little nephews, and she kind of said, well, we have to create a sound that as soon as they hear it, they'll just come sliding in front of the TV set, so they'll know it's Reading Rainbow, and they'll be excited. And she's like, and I said, I can do that, And I was totally into electronic music way back when, and I had these amazing synthesizers, and we created that do-do-do-do-do-do sound, and it seemed to do the trick, and we ran it through the whole song, and it became the original theme for Reading Rainbow. There have been a couple over the years.
And I don't know if you noticed from where you were sitting in the house, but I watched that as soon as the song started, everyone started to sway. It was like you got the cue and everyone there's just that sound to it. And you sang along, and that's what we should have done. We should have all given you guys all microphones. That we've got a guitar here, so that might be coming soon.
I brought my ukulele if you want to do a sing-along. I'm ready to go.
So I wanted to ask also about, because you served as music director,
Yes.
So that included all of those additional songs and the episodes and the...
Yeah, there was, I'm sorry. You didn't, yeah, there was, I think over the 26-year run, there was 40-something songs that I composed along with Janet and sometimes other people. And I once added it up to I wrote 27 hours worth of background music for 155 episodes. Because what was so cool about Reading Rainbow is that every episode took you to a different place. Wherever the book led us, that's where we had to go. So I got to work with, American folk musicians and Chinese musicians and Thai musicians. And I had this, it wasn't like writing for like a soap opera, right? Where all the cues kind of sound the same and everything's kind of in the same location all the time. So every episode, bunch of new music, and it kept it fresh and exciting. And it's hard to keep things fresh and exciting for 26 years. But Reading Rainbow was always an act of love for everybody involved in the show, which you saw in the film here. And just being a part of it was a wonderful experience.
And what was that process like? The creators would tell you, here's a theme, or this is the book, and how much time would you have between here's what we need for this episode to creating it?
Not enough time. Because the music's always last, unless there's a song that they have to edit to. The songs, if there was a song in that episode, they said we're going to an aquarium, we're doing a song about fish, come up with a song. And we would get together and we would write a song, and we'd go through the approval process and get it ready for production so they could edit it to it and know what they were shooting to. However, when it came to all the other music, which was the vast majority of the music, was not the songs at all, but all the background music and the scoring for the books and all of that stuff, we had 3 days to turn around an episode. Basically, everybody took their time in shooting and editing, and they were all like tweaking, and then, okay, this is going on the air in 3 days. Write music now.
Do you have a favorite score or song from a favorite episode?
Oh, that's a tough one. You know, I think there's so many that I like, but probably the most meaningful one, if I can switch it from favorite to meaningful,
Absolutely.
was the one we did about 9/11 and being able to work with those children and to write that song with them over a period of about a week every day. I went down to their school and we worked on the lyrics together and worked on the song together, and then having them in the studio, and they were so full of feeling, and it was all so very meaningful. Not every song was that way. That one was the most meaningful by far. In terms of the favorite, that's a tough one. I'm not even going to go there. Sorry.
Okay. So I'm sure you may have heard, but recently the song Butterfly in the Sky has resurfaced online through a TikTok internet sensation. And I'm curious how you feel sort of a new generation has found this song and connected with it in a fun way.
Bewildered. It was pointed out to me that it went viral on TikTok. Around 500,000 videos were made. I don't know how many countless millions of views those videos had been seen. Yeah, it was my first time on TikTok, I have to admit. And I'm looking at that going, these kids never even saw the show. You know, they never watched the show. Someone had made what they call a filter on TikTok that includes some visuals, and I had licensed the song to TikTok so that maybe something like this would happen, and it did, and it was quite amazing, really.
And I'm glad to hear that you had licensed it, that you kind of had preempted it or hoped, and it's great that you were.
Yeah, that's actually one of the.
You always worry that, you know, something comes on the internet and does the originator get credit and whatnot to it. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. As a young composer, I mean, I was young. I was 22 or something like that when I started doing Reading Rainbow. Just came to New York from Pittsburgh, where I grew up, right out of college, built a little recording studio, and this kind of came in. And yeah, we'll do a demo for a theme song, and they picked it, and that kind of changed my whole life, which is a wonderful thing. However, I had a wonderful old lawyer at the time, Joe Taubman. He said, you know, these people are from Nebraska. They want you to do a buyout. Let's just license it to them, and you get to keep you be the publisher. And we were able, they liked the song so much, we had a little bit of leverage, I guess, that, it became something, its own little business on its own, just licensing the Reading Rainbow theme song all these years.
It's great that you had that advice early in your career.
Impossible to get these days. You cannot hold on to your rights as a composer these days, and hardly those days either, really.
How do you feel like your music and sound has changed since this was such the beginning of your career to where you are now?
When I listen to some of the old scores, quite frankly, I'm embarrassed. You know, it's true. I mean, they were lovely little melodies. I'm not talking about the songs necessarily. I always thought the songs were good, but the background scores, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I learned along the way, as did everybody else in this show, right? We were all first timers. You know, there was hardly anyone there except perhaps LeVar, who was almost a first timer. We all grew up with this show, and our careers all branched out from this show.
And it seems like that's part of the magic of it, right? That this was all something that, being new and fresh, allowed it to be something that no one had ever imagined before.
I think so. I mean, we certainly had energy. You know, I certainly at this age could not do what on that type of schedule that I was on for that show. I couldn't do it anymore. But that kind of youthful energy, the idea that we were doing something really good, I mean, that in itself kept all of us going. I mean, it was all about heart. We loved what we were doing, and as you saw when it ended, it was kind of like, now what? You know, there's hardly anything that comes along in life, in work, especially as a composer or anyone really, that you just love doing so much, and it's always fresh and exciting. And you know, my skills as a composer grew a lot over that 26-year period, and you know, equipment and synthesizer studios. It just led to so many different wonderful adventures and other TV shows too. So
That's great. So before I turn it to the audience for questions, so start to think, I want to go back to the first question I asked just before the film started. What makes something both nostalgic and timeless at the same time?
Oh, I didn't know I had to answer that.
Surprise!
Okay, it's just a simple word. I think it's just love. Just something you love can be nostalgic and timeless.
I think that's perfect. Great. Do we have any questions from the audience? We'll have a microphone.
Good evening.
Hey.
It's great to see you here, and I got to tell you, you were into the electronic music back then, back when it was still really new, and a demo you did on the show is also the reason I grew up completely fascinated with the Fairlight CMI. But I wanted to ask about that because you could be in the next room and you would know that Reading Rainbow music was happening because it had that sound to it. It was so cohesive. Could you talk a little bit about the tools you had available to you, how that sort of helped form and shape how all that worked?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we could get into some heavy tech here. When I came to New York, my dream was to bring electronic music, into the New York scene. I had a person that I admired. Her name was Suzanne Ciani, who lived in New York and was making a ton of money doing commercials, and that was my inspiration. While in Pittsburgh, I started doing commercial music. I was the music director for the Pittsburgh Public Theater and really got into the idea of writing music that people liked, because in college they taught us how to write music that people hated. Being avant-garde and as crazy as can be. So, when I was in Pittsburgh and, I wrote music for 12th Night and everybody loved it, I was going, that feels a lot better. So when I came to New York, there was a very special synthesizer maker in Berkeley, California, named Donald Buchla. Donald, most people have never heard his name, but at the same time that Moog, who everybody knows, was making synthesizers on the East Coast, Donald Buchla was making really crazy synthesizers on the West Coast. And in college, I got introduced to the Buchla synthesizer, which I took my life savings and bought one right out of college. And I brought it to New York and kind of built a career based on that interesting technology. And so that opening was done on a Buchla synthesizer. They're very rare. There's probably maybe 500 of them in existence or something like that. I'm still a big fan. I still use it, newer versions of the Buchla every day. But to get to your question, by the time when I built my studio, I had the Buchla. I bought a Fairlight because I was making some money doing commercials. Fairlight was the first computer music instrument. I had an Oberheim 4-voice. I had a Fender Rhodes. I had a DX7. All of those things were used to make that the original theme song for Reading Rainbow, and most of this first couple of seasons. Does that answer your question?
Take a question here.
Hello.
Hi.
On the same topic, so the question I had was very similar to your question, which was a lot of the sounds that you use in this show sound synthesized, but not so much synthesized to imitate a specific instrument. They sounded like new sounds, stuff I hadn't really heard before. And so we just heard how you did that, but why was that choice made to not go with traditional sounds, to use these kind of new sounds? What was the idea or goal there?
I think that it was just the way I was looking at the world at that time. We had Sesame Street, and they always had the house band, piano, drums, and bass, and a rhythm section, maybe a brass section, and they were doing very traditional kind of what we would call kids music, right? So my whole thing, and I talked to the producers about this early on, is I had a belief then, and I may still have it now, I'm not sure, that there's no such thing as children's music. that was what I told everybody whenever I was interviewed, when everyone was I said, there's no such thing as children's music. There's just good music. And to talk down to children through music, I think it is a big mistake in some ways, especially to older children. Nursery rhymes are really important for learning, and the repetition is important. But when you're doing a show like Reading Rainbow, I felt like the whole vibe of the show was to be different. And luckily, that was kind of where I was coming from artistically, too. So there were times where I, used rock guitars and, all that stuff, mainly in the songs, because that was a good way to propel the songs along. And I was producing at a time in New York when the quality of musicians I got to work with were just phenomenal. The great singers and the great guitar players, the session players, the bass players, the drummers. New York was just rich with talent because they were all making a fortune doing commercials. No one's making any money doing anything in the music business anymore, but this was at really the top of the game in New York City, where all the great musicians were hanging out and all had pagers that were going off for the next gig all the time. It was a very exciting time.
And it seems like your approach with music of not, playing into the children's aspect really aligned with what the goals of the producers had, which was to just talk to children as they are and to treat them as young adults and humans and really connect with them. And it's amazing that your music really matched that goal and that quality. So there's one more question in the center here.
Well, first, thank you for the earworm. That really,
My apologies for
just
that.
say the word butterfly and it, butterfly in the sky, it automatically kicks in for all these years. And how fortunate for you to be part of an ensemble. That whole community that you were a part of, it just sounds so magical. But I also think that people don't understand the importance of how the music makes the whole thing cohesive. And your gift for doing that is extraordinary. But I want to know, so now what? So what have you been doing? So what have you been doing since Reading Rainbow ended?
Well, I did a lot of other kids shows. I did all of the music for Shining Time Station, which was another big 80s show, right? All the music in the jukebox band for Shining Time Station. Did another series called The Magic Adventures of Mumphy, which was big in England and in Japan and somewhat here. I did a show that I thought was going to be the next Reading Rainbow called The Puzzle Place, produced by the same producers, but it lasted only 2 years. And after that, we're talking about 35 years of solid writing music every day for TV. I needed to do something different. And with my experience as an educator, because I have taught audio and music, I started with a partner an online education company called Ask.video, where we teach people how to use all these amazing tools, Logic, Pro Tools, all the major software packages and hardware that you need to make music, and photography and graphic design and filmmaking. It's a very popular site for the creatives, and I've been doing that for about 18 years. However, I'm still every day playing music. I did a blues gig just 2 weeks ago, so it's I keep active. I'm not doing it for TV anymore, though. Although if something came along, I would probably do it.
Are there any current musicians that you see that you are really excited about their work currently?
Not really.
Noted. We have time for one more question. We'll take two more.
So I also wanted to thank you. I'm trying not to get all parasocial. It's very hard. I started kindergarten knowing the word onomatopoeia because of you. And also thank you for all the earworms and everything. So I have a very specific process question. Because in my favorite episode of Reading Rainbow, which was a chair for my mother, you were on set. Was that a routine thing? Were you normally there while they were filming, or was that specific for that one episode?
I was rarely there when they were filming, only when it seemed appropriate and they needed to have the music guy there. It was staged in that sense. I'm so sorry. to bust the through the third wall there. Yeah, I mean, but there were other episodes where, like the 9/11 episode. I mean, that was me really there conducting kids and in the studio and all that stuff. So there were times when it was not staged. And I'm trying to remember the scene in Chair for My Mother. I cannot remember it.
I'm obsessed, Mr. Horelick. It's terrible. So the choreography was happening, and Sammy Dallas Bays came to talk to you because he said this isn't working. So you reworked.
Oh, so that was the teamwork episode?
Yes.
Okay, the teamwork episode.
teamwork-
Totally staged.
You're breaking my
Sammy
heart, sir.
Dallas Bays and I had many, many fights about that, putting that together. And I was always upset with him that at the very end, it doesn't spell teamwork. I'm going, what does it take, Mr. Bays, as a choreographer, to stack up people in the right way? It just, and there were a couple of other run-ins with Mr. Bays, but he was a nice man. We just had our creative differences.
All right, your question.
Yeah, I just want to echo the sentiments. Reading Rainbow was, again, running down the living room floor to watch it. My question is, when did y'all realize, wondering if you ever realized that Reading Rainbow was also for adults? Because there's a hyper focus on the children, but I do remember, like, my parents also being excited, like, we're watching the show with the kids, and I'm like, sure, you're definitely doing this for yourself too. So I want to know, within those 26 years, if there was a point when y'all as an ensemble realized that it's just not for the children.
Well, I think it's because we never talked down to the children that it just naturally became that. I remember, in the middle of the many seasons, that it was announced that Reading Rainbow was the most adult-watched kid show in television history. And I thought about that. I'm going, yeah, I think we're doing something right here. It really wasn't a kid show. It was really a family show when you think about it. There was nothing, stupid and silly about it, like a lot of kid shows are these days. And even during Reading Rainbow, during the later years, those other shows came along that were all truly about making money and creating characters that would just make millions for the producers. Reading Rainbow never had, as they said, anything to sell. I mean, what are you going to do, like LeVar lunchboxes, maybe, LeVar dolls? It just...
We had a shout out about the thermos for those who didn't hear.
They tried, but it wasn't. It just was never in the. It was never in the business plan to make money. I mean, come on, that's how pure this show was, and that's why we all love being a part of it. And I think everybody senses that too. You're not being exploited when you watch Reading Rainbow. You're not being asked for anything, just to enjoy it.
So thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And you did bring your ukulele.
I brought. If I play my ukulele, will you guys sing along with the theme song? Okay. You have to help me out here. I'm not a singer. As you could see when I was.
Do I have a volunteer to Do I have a volunteer who wants to sing along?
Everybody.
Everyone. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Why don't you mic that? So the butterfly in the sky, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Butterfly in the sky. I can cook what it says.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, everyone, so much. And just a reminder, on Tuesday, February 28th, we'll be screening Judy Blume Forever, an amazing documentary about her life and legacy. It'll be the closing night of the Books That Changed My Life Festival. I will warn you that it is selling very quickly and will sell out, so if it piques your interest just a little bit, I encourage you to get your tickets soon. And I look forward to seeing you back at the JCC soon.